All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Mike Rosenberg. I work for Arity. We're a division of Allstate that focuses on making transportation safer, smarter, and more useful for everyone. We design software and hardware to measure driving behavior and assess riskiness on the road, and that's our focus. And we're separate and distinct from Allstate. Our data center is entirely in the cloud. Allstate is almost completely on-prem. We do that because we do business with other insurance companies and we can't have that data commingle, and we need to have the safety and security and the separation. So why FinOps? I love this, and some of the people who probably share my hairline also love this. It goes back to the beginning of computing. Computer cycles matter, storage matters, everything you do matters. You have to be economical with your resources. It's no different than when you had computing back in the day. My father's first dot matrix line printer for his commercial business was 15,000 bucks. So when things cost that much and performed that poorly, you had to use them smartly. Here, we've got gigahertz processors and all the good stuff, and things run super fast, except there's very limited constraints, especially in a cloud environment where you can spin up things and make costs happen overnight. And I'm going to give you an example of that. And it matters because before, the developers and the architects, they did not have to worry about what was a variable cost and what was a fixed cost. You went through the planning, you did your procurement, they bought the racks, or you had business with rack space, they stood them up, you put your applications on, you run, you go, and it's all good. Most developers, they may have had an econ class, and it's variable cost, fixed cost. My background, I'm going to make the slides available, so if you don't need to take pictures, I'm going to give the deck to Margaret, and she's going to make that available so everybody can, go through it at their own leisure. You brushed on the economics of things. And what's really important, especially in Amazon, if you don't understand the drivers of your cost, bad things happen. And Greg mentioned a $60,000 bill that happens overnight. See if that flips over. Hang on a sec. Now, I'm not going to belabor it, but we had a $63,000 oops on the 31st. I think it was a Saturday. They were backing up logs from S3 to Glacier. That's fantastic. You're taking your cost structure from 2.3 cents a gig down to 0.4 of a penny. Fantastic. That data storage cost was $8.74. They took 100 kilobyte log files and they wrote them to Glacier. So who sees the first problem there? Glacier gives you 40 kilobytes of metadata and overhead. So now you're paying a 40% premium because you don't understand the mechanics of Glacier. Second problem, after your first million puts, it's 5 cents a thousand. So how much does it cost when you do 1.29 billion puts? Just under 64,000 bucks. So you need to understand and you need to educate yourself as to the underlying mechanics of the Amazon services that you're using, otherwise bad things happen. And we're making an appeal to Amazon, and hopefully they will show mercy on us and, give us some remediation on the bill there. But you need to shift almost to a manufacturing mindset and understand variability and ensure that your product is built right and really work with the underlying things. People don't think about network communication cost, region to region or intra-AZ, or moving a gigabyte in a European region is far more expensive than moving a gigabyte here around the United States. And those things add up at scale, and it really, really matters. So for the first time, and it's kind of was touched on by Greg, engineers and developers have a stake in determining whether your gross margin holds up or it collapses based upon how they develop. And you need to educate them and get them familiar with, the part of the system they're going to control. You need to drive for greater elasticity and make your systems, I like to say it as, make them as small as possible, make your architecture as small as possible, but no smaller. stealing from Einstein when I say that. The operational cost and accountabilities now are in the dev team, not the finance manager or the project manager, and that really matters. And I spend a good portion of my time working with the engineering and development staff, educating them onto the resources they're using and the impact of how they use those resources. So my definition of FinOps, it's kind of the intersection of planning, architecture, operations, and accounting. And because those are the people I work with all day long. I kind of sit in the middle between those four groups. And to me, that's how FinOps has been growing up at Arity. We, the planning folks, they want to understand, it's planning, designing, measuring, and reporting, and that cycle just goes around and around and around. And probably the best way I heard that explained in one of the FinOps.org calls that happens every other Wednesday is somebody says a FinOps person is a full stack business person. And you really have to have, if you're a product-driven company, you need to understand the product and the product's direction and roadmap and where it's going and the customers it wishes to serve. What is the market like and the price points? Because now the developers have that heavy hand and accountability into gross margin based upon your design. So how many here think FinOps is just about cost optimization and just driving down your unit cost? I'm going to steal from Mike Fuller from Atlassian, who's one of the founders of FinOps.org, and this is his view that he presented at CloudyCon a couple weeks ago. And these are the elements that, and I think he did a great job of explaining it. We're teaching the engineers about debits and credits. We're teaching the finance folks about bits and bytes. And to give you a quick story, we had somebody spin up 19 servers putting in a Hadoop cluster. And our head of finance was like, I didn't sign off on anything, turn it off. And it's like, it doesn't work that way anymore. These guys can spin up whatever they want, whenever they want, and we hire smart, capable people, and we empower them, and they go off and, they do the right thing. And he was incensed that he was not part of the chain of command to let that turn on and let that expense go forward, because in the old world, that's the way it worked. I have a project, here's what it's going to be. I need this many servers, this much disk, this much network capability, this kind of pipe for the internet, what have you. And then the finance people were involved before the first line of code was written, and that just doesn't work that way anymore. I've got some slides here, and this is directly from some of the FinOps Foundation materials that was presented at CloudyCon. And it kind of gives the overview. And the key thing is you're going to focus again on that triangle of speed, delivery, and cost, or as to say it, it's good, fast, and cheap. What matters to you? You can do a lot of things in a very, very quickly, very well, or very badly, as in the case of the folks who did our backup process for into Glacier. And Greg touched upon this. It's a practice. It's not a prescriptive process. What works for us at Arity is not going to be the same at Morningstar, is not going to be the same at your company. Everybody approaches their business a little bit differently, and you have to tailor your FinOps to support your organization's needs, both front office, middle office, back office, however you're set up. The collaboration, I can't stress that enough. I have to, as a FinOps, I've been given stern warnings. I can't be a cost accountant because then I've overstepped my bounds on the finance side. And I'm not an engineer or architect, then I've overstepped my bounds on the engineering side. So I've got to sit in that middle of the Venn diagram where that all overlaps. And you have to just be a value add to those teams and show how the practice can make them make better decisions and add more value to your company. Because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about, is creating value for the markets you serve and the products you sell. The principles of the FinOps, I'm not going to read them to you, but I'm going to touch on a couple of them as we go through here. One of the key things that we did very early on at Arity is we developed a unit economic model. We measure how people drive. So our core model is built upon trips and connections. Connections create the trips, whether you're using our hardware or software, and trips are exactly what you think they are, a trip in your car from point A to point B. We express everything in cost per connection. How much are our AWS costs on a cost per connection basis? Then we disaggregate that. How much is the compute? How much is the storage? How much is the network? Then we take it a further level down and we go by stack. So we have our data flow, which is at the front end for all the ingestion. We have the operational data stores in the middle, and then we have the data lake on the back end. So we have the cost per connection to operate data flow, cost per connection to operate the data lake. Then we take it a level below, and our data lake is Hadoop. So how much does it cost for Zookeeper, Ambari, the master nodes, edge nodes on a cost per connection basis? Because I want the developers to see that when they make a change, there is an economic impact. And we press them pretty hard if the cost per connection goes up. If it's a bug fix, that's cool. It's cost of doing business. If it's regulatory, GDPR, CCPA, for anybody who has to abide by those, then it is what it is. If you made a change and the cost went up and there's no benefit, you need to put together a good technical case as to why we don't want to roll that back. If you're laying the groundwork for future features, functions, and features and options and what have you, that's fantastic because you're part of a product's business plan. If you made a change because you thought it would be cool to put in this really nifty recursive routine that's 8 lines instead of some linear code that's 4 paragraphs long, we're going to have you back it out because you are responsible for margin, and if you drive up the cost per connection for no good reason, we're going to ask you to roll it back. Some of the capabilities, the thing I like is a strategy. You have chargebacks and showbacks. There's something called shameback, which I absolutely love. And if you are operating and your resources in production are not tagged, you get into that bottom line, which accountants would call a plug, which bridges the things you know to the bottom line. And then you get to explain to our finance director, Dan, who wants to sign off on everything, where you spent the money and why. So that's one of the things I use to get people to tag everything. And we're going to touch on tagging a little bit more. But building scorecards and having people, you can take the quadrant, elasticity and, against whatever cost. And we want people to make as elastic as architecture as possible, use what you need to use. And I'm preaching to the developers here because you guys know that. That's what you live and breathe. But we came from, big Allstate-owned data centers, and our initial run at the cloud was a lift and shift. And we're slowly tearing this monolithic application apart, and eventually we'll be containerized and doing things what I would say would be the right way and more appropriate for the cloud. So what are some of the things we're doing here? Because I know everybody wants to say, what are you guys at Arity doing actually to drive down the costs? And it's a lot more than buying our eyes and doing things like that. First thing, I can't stress this enough. Tag your resources. But before you tag your resources, sit down with the business, with the product teams, with finance, with accounting, with your DevOps crew. What business and operational questions do you need to answer? Throwing tags out there for the sake of having tags is a great way to lose the rest of what hair I have left. It really is something you need to put a lot of thought into it, a lot of tabletop exercises, and work it on paper and then implement it and be ruthless SOBs about enforcing it. Because a good tagging policy lets you make good decisions, both operationally and otherwise. We have our node, we're tagged down to a node level. I can tell you what Hadoop node's misbehaving by looking at yesterday's numbers. And then I can have the guys go check it out. Maybe it's something that needs to be recycled, or there's some anomaly going on that nobody thought about. But you can pick it up, because to me, dollars and cents are a proxy for operational efficiency. And I can tell when something is not operating because of the variation in the financial side of things. Storage strategy. We're long tail heavy on storage. And from EBS down to Glacier Deep Archive, you're talking orders of magnitude for your storage costs and the difference. And challenge people. We have a team that has, 124 terabytes in an S3 bucket because they need it. They have to have it. It's got to be readily available. I need that millisecond response time. So 4 months ago, I put CloudWatch metrics on it. And when you come to the conversation armed with data, well, it's hard to argue with. They're like, we need this, we use this all the time. It's like, guys, I'll call it WARN, write once, read never. They had 100 and God knows how many terabytes of data that they've just been accumulating that have never been read by any application. It's like, guys, this is going to Glacier, and we're not going to do it in 100 kilobyte chunks. We're going to do it as big as Glacier will let us do it to get that put cost down. But challenge people on it. Use data. CloudWatch metrics are your friends. They do cost, especially as many as we use. And we've written some of our own custom ones, especially to monitor memory utilization, because that's not one you get off the shelf. Another piece was storage. So the straw man argument here is you ingest a terabyte on the first of the month, and it costs $100 to store that terabyte for a month. Just making up some numbers here. And you ingest a terabyte every month of the year. At the end of the year, you have 78 storage months of cost. So your time to live becomes a very important consideration. And this is irrespective of if you're Azure, GCP or AWS, and this all falls into FinOps and making people aware of these costs. Because on-prem, that stuff's on a 3 or a 5 year amortization cycle. The developers never see that stuff. But here, the difference between 12 months and 13 months, your cost factor goes from 78 to 91. 14 months, you're at 105, 120, then 136. If you're storing something for 5 years because it's regulatory, you're in the thousands as a multiplier for the lifetime cost to store that data. And you need to think of it that way. So if you can flush it fast, do it. If you have no reason to keep it, security is going to want to keep their log files for some period of time. We have regulatory considerations because we rate drivers in the Allstate MileWise program based upon how far they drive, and anything that touches anything in the regulatory space, we keep for a very long time. But those are things to think about that you never had to worry about before because you were in the fixed cost universe. This is one of my favorites, data footprint management. So when on your cell phone, when you use software, the latitude and longitude is 15 digits. And in case of the longitude, it's got the negative sign, so it's a total of 16, 17 if you count the decimal point. We asked, what benefit do I get from keeping that many digits? So we put the data scientists on it. When you move that last decimal place on that top row there, that goes out, that ends in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you're moving in angstroms. That's at an atomic level. We can't measure driving behavior that way. So we asked the data scientists, work through the process, run the data through our model, and back it down until you get to a point where it impacts the model's behavior. And we determined it's 7 digits. We can have 7 digits of GPS without any impact to anything we do. And that adds up there. It's got a multiplicative benefit. If it's coming off your phone, it's using your phone's battery. If it's coming off your phone, it's using your phone's data plan. Our ingestion can now handle more capacity because we've trimmed off, 8 digits off of that. Our processes run faster, our payloads are smaller, and if you take it all the way down the food chain to the back end of things, we're storing less data, but it's all significant. Same thing with speed. Speeds come off, I think, with 7 digits. We cut that down to 2 because it doesn't impact the model. But we did the testing, we did the analysis. They weren't just wild guesses to see what we could get away with. And things like that matter because we deal in billions of GPS points a day. We probably have scored over 100 billion miles in the last couple of years. And we grab GPS points every second. So it adds up very, very quickly. We had consultants come in and get us started in our cloud journey, and they put everything on Red Hat. It's kind of the old phrase for, again, those of us who've been around a little while, nobody ever got fired by using IBM. Well, when you put in Red Hat, it's safe, it's stable, it gets the job done. You're paying anywhere from 6 to 15 cents an EC2 hour for Red Hat. And that stuff adds up very, very quickly. When I took over the role, or I created the role back in March of 17, we were spending $52,000 a month in Red Hat Premium. Moving to Ubuntu has cut our bill dramatically. If you want Red Hat, you need a business case for it. If the vendor support only comes with Red Hat, that's a good enough business case. But if the developer or the architect wants to use it just because, no can do. You need to have a technical case to let us authorize you to put a new Red Hat in. Sir?
Sorry.
Oh, no, no, that's no problem. Please ask your question.
Okay, I just had this conversation today because, you know, we have a satellite server RHEL, and I can impact and make sure that my instances are patched. Or I can make them set up as SAP external clusters. I can't do that.
No, but so you've got a technical case that says it's the right thing to use. That's perfectly fine. We had people install Red Hat just because they were familiar and comfortable with it and had there were no differentiating factors in our use cases between Ubuntu, CentOS, Red Hat. So why spend the extra money if there's no need to, especially when you're at scale, because pennies.
But are you driving that use case? Are you saying, look, are you challenging them on, okay, what is your reason for, you know?
Right, we put in as a matter of course that when you're in the architectural process and you're specifying all the components they're going to be, if somebody says Red Hat, we start asking, they have to present the why behind the ask. You just can't use it because I can spin it up, just because I can. Another thing, Red Hat bills by the hour, Ubuntu bills by the second. So if you're doing truly ephemeral loads, that matters because that adds up very, very quickly, again, especially if you're at scale. You had another question, sir?
Sorry, one last question.
Oh, please.
Is there a, please help me out of mind. Is there an Ubuntu enterprise version that will support patching and those kind of requirements?
See, that's where I'd go to one of my technical guys and ask that question. I don't know enough to answer that question. But I know we cycle every EC2 at least once a month. That's a part of the enterprise security policy. And everything is patched and brought up as a matter of a monthly cycle. They do like week 1 of the month is non-prod, week 2 of the month is pre-prod, week 3 of the month is prod. You get a week of rest, and then it starts all over again.
But without engaging in Ubuntu or with a enterprise capability, then how do you get those patches?
We have a central security service that prepares everything for us. So security is centrally managed in the Allstate enterprise. They go through all that, they push it down to us. We have to at least go through the process once a month to make sure that we're current. And that's part of our standard operating procedure.
Can I ask how many of your instances then are on Ubuntu versus RHEL?
Too many. It is 45% of the hours and 83% of the cost. I don't have an exact count, I just think in terms of the percentages. And we're running several thousand instances. So little things like this add up to be huge amounts of money. And then the developers, this is probably old hat for you guys, you know, move up to the generations as soon as possible. I pointed out the biggest generational change in the last round between the eyes. That's the biggest number I found. We still have people, I think of them as my kids. They don't turn out the lights when they leave the room. They've over-provisioned in the lower environments because, I don't know, that's what they decided to do. You know, use spot instances to do your testing of your machine learning models, or to train your machine learning models and do your testing. If a test, you know, spots don't get called away that often, and if you're running a test case, you restart. There's no harm, no foul. And as I mentioned earlier, understand the cost components for your AWS resources. Typically, developers who came from an on-prem world didn't worry about gets and puts other than throughput management, not a cost side of it. You know, moving data from point A to point B, the behaviors of all these services. Read, you know, spend a little time, read the book, read the manual pages in Amazon. Everything's very, very well documented, as you guys know. And make that a part of the process. We've added to our architectural review the cost component. And let me tell you, we're, as Caitlin's going to tell you, you know, we're in budgeting season now, just like everyone else. The people who got their stuff approved first for the 2020 budget came with not only the technical case, but the cost savings. And they worked it through. We helped them with the models and made sure the numbers were valid and they could stand up. And those are the folks who sailed through and getting their projects lined up for next year's queue. Some things, some resources. Again, I'm going to make this deck available so you don't have to copy it. The FinOps Foundation, started by J.R. Stormont and Mike Fuller at Atlassian. and JR's with Cloudability. It's a fantastic organization, like-minded folks. I think there's, on the every other week call, they've had several hundred people from many, many countries enjoy and get together and share, because this is a brand new world for all of us. CloudyCon was a couple of weeks ago. It was just a fabulously constructed event. I'm looking forward to next year's. There's 2 books. JR and Mike are putting out a book that'll be released in the spring. It'll be available through O'Reilly. And this is a book, I've got about 30 or 40 pages left to go, the Mastering AWS Cost Optimization. If you have Kindle Unlimited, it's free. It's a part of your subscription. Caitlin's holding it right there. Mine's in my backpack. It is a very, very good book, and I suggest that you get it. So I'm going to turn it over to Caitlin, and she's going to take us across the finish line. So thank you for your time.
Did you want to talk about the FinOps group?
Here.
Yeah.
If anybody's interested in looking to put together a FinOps group here in Chicago, I'm happy to help get that launched under the Chicago AWS meetup. I want to make a subgroup, and if anybody's interested, please contact me. In the slide deck, you'll have my LinkedIn and my personal email. It's mikerosenberg@hotmail.com. Give me a shout. I'm happy to meet with anybody, answer your questions, help you out with your situations at work. But if we can stand up our own community, I think that would be just a great thing for everyone.